Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Every year on March the 25th, we celebrate the anniversary of St. John Paul the Great's encyclical Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life. This year, March the 25th, marks the 30th anniversary of this wondrous encyclical. It's the inspiration for Bishop Daniel Thomas's program, Walking with Moms in Need. It's an initiative to help pregnant and parenting mothers. Bishop Thomas joins us to talk more about how the encyclical influenced his work and his life. Bishop Daniel Thomas has served as Bishop of Toledo, Ohio since 2014. He's also the chairman of the USCCB's Pro-Life Activities Committee, and his Bishop's Corner program can be heard Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. and Fridays at 11 a.m. and Saturdays at noon on Annunciation Radio, which is owned and operated by Ave Maria Radio. Your Grace, it's great to speak with you. How are you?
Dr. Marcus, good afternoon. So good to be with you and with all the listeners. I'm so grateful.
Well, I'm honored to be able to be speaking with you. You have such a heart for evangelization and especially the proclamation of the gospel for the salvation of souls. And when I found out about the link between your life's work and a lot of your projects and Evangelium Vitae, I can't say I was surprised. But in the interest of our listeners, tell them about your first encounter with Evangelium Vitae and what that did for you.
Sure. Well, I think for any of us, when we read it, it's obviously one of the real keys to the papal magisterium of Pope St. John Paul II. And of course, now already in its 30th anniversary, I must confess, it's hard for me to believe I'm that old, Marcus.
Right.
But the reality is, I think as all of us, our Holy Father John Paul had such an extraordinary gift of communicating the truth in an absolutely receivable way. And trust me, even at that time, but even now more at this time, I believe that the message of the truth about life and the dignity of every human life is essential, even more essential today perhaps than it was when he wrote it, because we also know that he was prophetic in so many ways, including this way. So obviously his teaching continues to inspire, and for me it was the truth that he was communicating that it helped me. For example, I'm now almost 40 years ordained a priest, but it helped pastors and priests and others, teachers, in how to communicate the truth of life and to be able to communicate that in a receivable way. So I think that was part of the genius of Evangelium Vitae.
I have to tell you, like you, it was hard for me to fathom that the document is 30 years old. I'm going to reveal my age now. I was 6 years old when the document was dropped, and it would be a long time before I came into the church. But I discovered this document alongside the slew of other documents of the church when I studied my way in. And I realized how prophetic it was, because even though it was released in 1995, the truths that John Paul II was either warning us about or putting his finger on was so prevalent in my 20s and now in my 30s that it is a wonder that we didn't wake up and listen to him early on.
Well, it's fascinating to me. He follows the truths that were communicated by Paul VI, doesn't he? And those truths are timeless because it's the truth given to us through the gospel. So the gift is that we've had this for 30 years. Now we just need to continue to plumb the riches of it. And, one of the ways that the USCCB Pro-Life Committee, prior to me, that we 5 years ago, when it was 25 years, celebrated, was to begin this initiative of walking with moms in need. Mm-hmm. And, people think that this word accompaniment is brand new, but it's not, because it was obviously, it's papal teaching from Pope John Paul, Pope Benedict, now Pope Francis, and that encouragement to accompany people, and in particular way, to accompany each pregnant woman in need, now is in its 5th year as, for lack of a better term, as a program. And really, in essence, it's the ministry of the church.
And to couple with that, this undergirding theological realization, Your Excellency, that you have at the forefront of your mind and in the depths of your heart, this realization that the value of human life is not based on their utility. It's not based on what they can produce or how efficient they are. You, as a bishop, are honoring the fact that the inherent value of this life is because they're bearers of the divine image. And I ask you to share with us a rousing fatherly awakening so that all of us can reclaim that.
Well, I think the reality for us, with the church teaches and we proclaim the dignity and sanctity of all human life from conception until natural death. And I want to give you an example, Dr. Marcus, that I think is really, really striking to me. And that is that my nephew and his wife have a little boy. He's my great nephew. So it's not just nephew, it's my great nephew. And his name is Grayson. And when they discovered that they were pregnant with their child that they're now awaiting in May, they introduced to him, they wanted to have the, quote, gender reveal.
Right.
Now, that's a whole nother conversation, Marcus, isn't it? But clearly, gender reveals are all about either being male or female. So they said that they would cut into a cake and pull it out. And if the icing were blue, it was a boy. If it was pink, you know the story.
Right.
So they had him on their laps and they pulled the cake out and they said, look, Grayson, you're having a little sister. And they had already named her. It's beautiful. In the womb, they named her Phoebe. And they pulled out this piece of cake and they said, Grayson, would you like a piece of cake? He said, yes. And he said, and I would like Phoebe to have a piece of cake.
Oh,
and his mother said, well, Grayson, we can't do that yet because, in fact, Phoebe can't eat the cake because she's still in mommy's belly. And he responded, then I don't want a piece of cake either. Isn't that extraordinary? Which in that, I share that because it shares the truth and the reality coming from the mind of a little 3.5-year-old child that he wanted his sister, who he didn't have to be told she was alive. He understood from his parents' teaching. Here was his sister in the womb, and she couldn't have cake, so he doesn't want it either.
I'm a father of very young children, Your Excellency, and so I'm melting because my children, I have a 3 and a 2-year-old and a 10-month-old, and so
beautiful.
The older two do some similar things for their little baby, but it never ceases to warm my heart to hear these stories because I think what this demonstrates, even at a natural level, that we seem to be ingrained with an understanding of the value of life that's greater than a utilitarian perspective. And I think we learn the utilitarian perspective as we grow up, which is so destructive to our society.
Absolutely. And I think a program like Walking with Moms in Need is exactly the opposite of that. And, I would encourage, for example, Dr. Marcus, all your listeners, if they're not familiar with it, and, they have to understand that it's obviously a nationwide parish-based initiative to increase support, love, and care for pregnant and parenting mothers in difficult circumstances. So this is the most practical outreach of the Catholic Church on a really, truly pro-life level. And if they're not familiar with it, they can go right to the action guide, for example, at www.walkingwithmoms.com and to the website of the USCCB, or even to their parish and ask, do we have Walking with Moms in Need yet? Because, Marcus, many parishes participate in some wonderful pro-life activity, but they might want to take that even further to a next step.
Yep, and I love what you're doing at the level of your diocese. And just to expand that conversation even further, Your Excellency, I mean, we're running out of time in the segment, but...
I'm sorry.
No.
We never have enough time, Marcus.
I know, our segments fly so fast, and... the fact of the matter is the Catholic Church leads the world in responses to, in this case, pregnant unwed mothers. And so the lie that Catholics are just pronatalists is completely debunked. Just say a word in encouragement for all of us to keep engaging in the pro-life conversation because of that.
Beautiful. So I think this initiative, now 5 years old, celebrating its 5th anniversary, this is showing exactly how the Church is not herself only and exclusively concerned about babies in the womb. Of course we are, because they are the most innocent and vulnerable.
Right.
But we're concerned about their mothers. We're concerned about women in need. We're concerned about fathers. And this extends across the board. So we have now a practical pastoral outreach. And that, you're right, when we show this to people, it debunks that attitude.
Thank you so much, Your Grace. My guest, Bishop Daniel Thomas, and we've been talking about Evangelium Vitae's anniversary and serving mothers in need. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.